Let's take our Bibles, please, and go to the book of Revelation. And before you really start reading in there, just go ahead and mark that and go to Genesis just for a moment. Genesis chapter number 11. And so Revelation 18, Genesis 11 is where we'll start off. I won't spend a lot of time in the Old Testament, but I just kind of want to draw the thread, pull the thread through where this has taken us here and what's concluding. And so Genesis is what number book of the Bible? The first, all right, it's indisputably the first. And the reason I say indisputably is because there are other books of the Bible that people argue about their order. And so, for instance, the order of the scripture that we have in regards to Genesis through Revelation, particularly the Old Testament, well, I guess the New Testament as well. There's been a lot of debate, a lot of argument about which books went where. Scofield is kind of the one that settled it. He's the one that, like, once he made the Scofield Reference Bible, kind of settled the order. And you'll notice that wasn't that long ago. And so you could still find Bibles. The King James Bible helped out with a lot of that. But even still, there was debate. So, like, should we do it in this way or that way? And anyway, so when we get to the order, you'll notice it's not all chronological. And so what you do have, book of Genesis is the first book of the Bible. And that's because it's covering the beginnings. And so the Genesis. And the book of Revelation is the culmination, although not necessarily the newest book of the Bible, so it's not written oldest to newest. For instance, the book of Job is probably penned down, written before the book of Genesis was written down, but described in a time period much later than Genesis chapter 1, obviously. And then the book of Revelation, there's questions in regards to when it took place, but it could be the oldest. There's debates about whether or not it took place in the 70s, or some people say as late as AD 96. And so, anyways, it's new. It may be, like, compared to us, obviously it seems very, very old. But it's definitely first century, and it's right around the time of some other books. I tend to think it's the last book of the New Testament that was written, so that's at the very end, but it covers the last thing. And so anyways, what you have is these end caps, Genesis all the way to Revelation, and it gives you the start and all the way to the finish. And you find this thread that goes throughout it, but it's very simple. And so Genesis chapter number 11, I don't want to make more than what it is, but let's go ahead and start here in verse, well, wrong page. All right, verse number 1. And the whole earth was of one tongue and of one speech. And it came to pass as they journeyed from the east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar. That comes up later. One of the reasons we talk about Shinar is because that will actually continue. It's not mentioned a lot, but there's no question this is a reference to Babel and Babylon. All right, so those are connected things, which is where I'm going with this. Which, by the way, does this part happen after the flood or before the flood? After, all right, so we see about Noah back in the past few chapters, and so now we see his generations in chapter number 10. But here, so they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there. So they just stopped. Now, what happened is everybody was making their way, but they get this group, they put them all together in the plains of Shinar, and they just, like, this is it. And they said one to another, "Go to, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly." And they had brick for stone, and slime had they for mortar. And they said, "Go to, let us build us a city and a tower, whose top may reach unto heaven. And let us make us a name, lest we be scattered abroad upon the face of the whole earth." And notice what happens in verse number 5. And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. I love that, by the way. These guys are like, we're going to build this major city, this big city, and this enormous tower that's going to reach heaven. And you see this literary introduction here of the way it describes, give you this visual picture of God descending down to come see their really tall tower. All right, so this is what happens, just belittling really to the efforts of man at this point. And in verse number 6, and the Lord said, "Behold, the people is one, and they have all one language, and this they begin to do. And now nothing will be restrained from them which they have imagined to do. Go to, let us go down, and there confound their language, that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore is the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound the language of all the earth, and from thence did the Lord scatter them abroad upon the face of all the earth. And so this is, you have the story. You'll notice that this is the story that takes place immediately following the flood that takes place in Genesis. In the book of Genesis, the Bible describes, you see it reading in chapter number 6 and 7, kind of the story as far as what happens. That the flood covers the whole world. And why was it that God sent the flood? Judgment. Because why? What's the... Man's heart was evil continually. The thoughts, the imaginations of man, they were constantly just evil. And so with that, God says, all right, enough is enough. And he finds one man, which is Noah, and they build the ark. He builds the ark. I'm not sure exactly how many people he employed on all this process. And usually all the pictures have him and his 3 sons working on it. But anyways, it's a big boat, all right? And really an ark is actually not even a boat. Ark literally means a box or a container. And so the idea is it's just that. So it's not designed to be a seafaring vessel. It's just a container that God will keep them safe in. And so I'm assuming there's things that made it boat-like. But the point is that this is what they make, and God wipes out the earth. And immediately they start moving. Now God gives them commands. God gives them directions. And we see the generations in chapter number 10 that describe eventually what they'll go to. But he stops to tell us in chapter 10 that they start something, that when they're unified, they do something really bad with this. They said that we're going to make a city and a tower. All right, those are two things. Now, you might say, well, it's all basically the same. We always picture the city, but the purpose in this, we always picture the tower, but the purpose in the city was the unification to accomplish the goal of reaching the height of top reaching the heaven. And so they're going to accomplish this thing. So they're building, which, by the way, God said, hey, they're not going to stop, and they're going to keep doing this, and they're going to be successful in some of the things they're trying to do. And so he tells them that unity is actually a bad thing. Now, the unity was a good thing. He wasn't saying like unity is bad. What he's saying here is that when man gets unified apart from him to defy God, that's the purpose of the building of the tower. In their defiance, man is capable of anything, unrestricted, incredibly creative, and this unity towards a bad thing is a bad thing. And so they create two things. They create a unifying place. This gives them prosperity, gives them location, gives them workers, and then they create a system through this tower. This is what's built there. And so human history begins there, specifically with this rebellion. One of the things we find out about this is that this is led by a guy named Nimrod. We see that a little bit as you're going into these generations. In chapter 9 and 10, he's a very powerful guy, and the word Nimrod literally just means rebel. It's a simple thing. And so this really pictures what's taking place. So what happens then in Babel is the same thing that just kind of continues on, and it is eventually destroyed in the book of Revelation. You might say, well, this is Babel. This is not what? Not Babylon. Is anybody like, wait, Pastor, do you realize those are two different words? Kind of. They kind of are two different words. In essence, what you have is basically the same exact word, but one is more city associated, but it is literally the same word. And so it's used it's translated for us in such a way that helps us understand what that word is, depending on context there. And so when we have it here is we have literally the same place. And not only that, it's going to explain it, that it is in the plains of Shinar. All right, so this is where we're going to this. It's going to describe it later on in regards to Babylon. And so what he's telling us here, he's given us some information that it all starts this way. Man gets together and they rebel and they do bad things. I've heard one preacher talk a little bit about this. I won't mention who he is because I highly respect him, except for this one message where he used this as a text for why people shouldn't live in cities and everybody should live out in the country. And that's one of those things, like, it's a step too far. Well, I like the message, but it was one of those things like I'm not really sure why that would be the case. And I like the country, I understand that, but But he had a point that when people get together, they do a lot of bad things. And the more you get them together, the more bad things they do. And so this is what's taking place. Now, I had a whole history of Babylon following this. We're just going to kind of bypass some of this. But what we find here is throughout the Old Testament, you're going to keep seeing the religion of Babel. Specifically, what I'll tell you is when we talk about the religion, the religious system and economy of Babel, is that the two of them work together. And in the book of 1 John, chapter number 2, there's a verse that we're very familiar. Starts off with, love not the world. And what's the next part? Okay, keep going. All right, good. So good. I'm glad you guys know the verse. So anyways, love not the world, neither the things that are in the world. The concept of that, sometimes we take the word love the world and we really struggle with, like, what does that mean? And sometimes we'll say that's just worldly thinking. That's just kind of like the philosophy of the world. That's the only thing you need to worry about. So then suddenly nothing is necessarily bad unless you have a bad motive for it. There is some pieces of truth to that. There are certain amoral things, right? It's like generally a chair, this type of chair, well, this is kind of a unique chair because we bought this from a church supply company. But I guess that would work, right? Because they don't only sell to independent Baptist churches. They don't sell only to Baptist churches or Christian churches. They sell to all sorts of stuff, places, okay? But anyways, we're not like, yeah, you're sitting in those immoral blue chairs. Those worldly chairs, that's not what we're looking at, but we do understand something. The systematic approach of the world is to get together and do things apart from God. And this is to be away from God. And so what we're seeing in Revelation chapter 18 is where God destroys the system of the world. And this is characterized in this city, which is Babylon. Chapter 17 ended in verse number 18, talking about the woman, the harlot that they come up against her. The 10 kings rise up against her, and she's done with. But then it tells us that she is the city. So it gives identification to her, that she is the city. I'm like, wait a second, her religious system is gone. That'd be like crushing the tower, but the city's still there. And so this is the idea. So you have a system that's destroyed, but the city's still there. And when we get to Revelation chapter 18, this is the wiping out of that city. It's done. Here's the thing. When the city is rebuilt, when the city is built, they can rebuild that tower. And what we've seen over generation after generation is that Babel has been rebuilt over and over and again. Now, technically, Babylon hasn't been rebuilt. I mean, it was rebuilt a couple of times. Then, during the time of Jesus, Babylon was almost empty there in what we know of the city Babylon, where Daniel and stuff like that had been. It was nearly empty, literally only a couple thousand people living in there. And at certain times it's been empty. In fact, somebody very famously tried to rebuild that city a while back. I can't remember when, was it in the 90s, in the last millennia? For those of you that lived back then, maybe before that. But Saddam Hussein, the president of Iraq, the leader of Iraq, when you don't know who that is, just read. But anyways, so Saddam Hussein fancied himself. He called himself the new Nebuchadnezzar, the resurrected Nebuchadnezzar, and he was going to rebuild Babylon. They tried, made some attempts, and still not rebuilt. And then eventually we invaded his country and killed him. But the point is that that's what's going on out there. And so anyway, so there's a question, well, is that specific city, does that have to be rebuilt then? And not necessarily, because it's been rebuilt in many ways. The world system has been rebelling against God constantly. And then what you find is kind of the draws, the pieces that go into it, even pieces that sometimes sneak into the church that God says, be careful, because that doesn't belong there. And we're going to see some of those pieces here today. And so chapter 18, verse number 1, and after these things, I saw another angel come down from heaven, having great power. We talked about that last week. This angel of glory that comes down. The earth was lightened with his glory. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, and has become the habitation of devils, and the hold of every foul spirit, and a cage of every unclean and hateful bird. And so you have this declaration that's made. Heaven declares this judgment. The world's night is pierced by divine light, and the light, which usually we would think of as a good thing, all right? When you think of light, think of the glorious light of the gospel. You think about God's glory. You usually think of it as good things. The Bible talks about every good gift and every perfect gift cometh where? From where? From above, and from who? From the Father of lights. And we think, okay, good, lights, good, gifts, good, gospel, good. But this one shows up full brightness. And the Bible says that this one lightened, the earth was lightened with his glory. Look how bright this guy is. And the great thing that he announces, judgment. Judgment. Judgment is the thing that gets announced here. And so this is a good thing. And it's a hard one for us because we're thinking, oh no, this is terrible. What's happening here, the destruction of Babylon is a terrible thing. And even though it's going to describe the destruction of Babylon itself, there's obviously a worldwide thing that's taken place, and he's just giving you a detail into the one specific thing. In verse number 2 is the cry of judgment. He cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon, the great has fallen, has become, I'm sorry, I read that, the habitation of devils. The double declaration, this is the same thing. Isaiah 21 verse 9 quotes it word for word, the same thing. This prophecy that's given. Babylon is fallen and is fallen. When it describes it in its idolatry, though. And all the graven images of her gods he hath broken unto the ground. And so everything that was being relied on is destroyed. Now, one of the things that happens with us when we think about the harlot, and we think about the false religious aspects to it and the false system of the world, the Bible does describe her in chapter 17 as the mother of harlots. And so this is not just a single religion or a single system, but this is the idea is this is the world's way, stemmed from this place of rebellion. And in any ways, we would say, yes, religious, but what you'll find out, and I've really appreciated conversations with Omar. Omar comes from a country that I'm not familiar with that background. I learn a ton from him. But what we find out is a lot of religions are identical. They just have different faces on them, different practices by name, but they come to find out they're identical, yet Christianity is entirely different. And so anyways, with it, this is what you find throughout chapter 17 and 18. And so what he tells us, though, is there's reasons for this judgment. Verse 3, for all nations have drunk of the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her. And the merchants of the earth are waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies. So this is where we start seeing it. One thing that happens is that we oftentimes try to divide something. We try to divide religion and practice. Now, I'm going to use the word religion, and I don't want to be like in the people are like, oh, we don't practice a religion. You know, we do practice a religion. We have a certain systematic approach to how we worship God, and as Christians, that's the idea. We don't practice religion to become a Christian. We are a Christian. We're saved people, hence we live in a certain way. And so, again, we do not follow a religion to get us saved or to get us to God or to get what we're asking for. And so, but let me just acknowledge something, though, that when it comes to that has to do with your view of who God is. All right? Now, that's going to determine a lot of things. And you'll notice that uniqueness in Christianity. You can't save yourself. You are not innately good. You need salvation. You need salvation. And then what's going to happen with that salvation is that you are called unto good works. And so you are different. And so there's a difference specifically in regards to Christianity that is upside down to just about any religion in the world, truly any of them. Because this is all done. Jesus did the whole thing for us. Even how we're going to live for Jesus is by him. Okay, so in this uniqueness, our perspective and our persuasion in regards to how we view God is going to adjust a lot of things. The way you work, where you work, how you're working, your family life, all these things are going to be affected by your view on God in such a way that this is your practice based on the way you're thinking about God. And so what happens in this occasion, in verse number 3, is that this system that was Babylon, which has always been, we saw this in Genesis 11, that has always been. It was, we're going to do this. We're going to reach God. We're going to ascend. And by the way, it sounds a little bit like Isaiah, doesn't it? Not Isaiah himself, but in chapter 14, when he talks about that king of Tyre, that he's addressing the devil. He's addressing Satan, Lucifer, and how art thou fallen, O Lucifer? And when he describes the fall of Lucifer, Lucifer's claims were, I will be like the Most High. And yet man replicates that same thing, that we can do this. The humanistic cry that is echoed in religious places are that we're good enough. You're good people, and all you have to do is just fix yourself some and make yourself better, and we can do this. The exact opposite of Christianity, exact opposite message from the gospel. And in any ways, in this, that system breeds a reliance on a number of things. And what's going to happen is a focus on materialistic things, basically here and now. And so you've got to make this life the best life ever. Doesn't Paul warn the church about this kind of thing? And Jude and Peter, don't they warn the church in regards to this kind of thing, to not heap onto yourselves teachers having itching ears, and to be careful about who you're following, because you're following people whose God is their belly, and people that are preaching for the sake of their improvement and for the fact that they'll take silly women and they'll lead them the wrong way. And all of these things are about material gain, about success, about sensuality, and all of these things. And he's saying, careful, those will creep into the church as well. You be careful with that. And this is because it belongs in the world system. That's where that's a spawn of the devil. That's where that comes from. And so the world gets enriched by following the devil system. This is what everybody's okay with. And you see this in verse number 3. So here's what he says. He says, come out of her. Look at verse number 4. 4 through 8. And I heard another voice from heaven saying, come out of her, my people, that ye be not partakers of her sins, and that ye receive not of her plagues. For her sins have reached unto heaven, and God hath remembered her iniquities. Reward her, even as she rewarded you, and double unto her double, according to her works. In the cup which she hath filled, fill to her double. How much she hath glorified herself and lived deliciously, so much torment and sorrow give her. For she saith in her heart, I sit a queen, and am no widow, and shall see no sorrow. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord God who judgeth her. At this point, the world burns. But he's describing this call that comes from this is get out of her. Get out of this system. Don't be in there. Now, we're talking about a end time. This is Daniel's 70th week. It's getting very close to the end. He's about to wipe them out. We see the abomination of desolation has already occurred, and he's saying, get out of her. Get out of this system. Now, part of it is in verse number 4 when he talks, come out of her, my people. I do believe, some people would suggest that this is just simply talking about, that's been the attitude that God has had about the world always. All right, so this is, which is fair. That's not a new thing. He's not like, well, go ahead and live like the world and revel in the world's ways until then. No, this has always been the system. Like, God wants us to come out and be ye separate, says the Lord. All right, so this is something that's different. But in this occasion, he's warning, all right, judgment is happening, which, by the way, there's a good reason for us not to attach ourselves to the things of this world as well, because God sees those things that the world does and says that doesn't belong for the Christian. And so don't live like the world. Don't be there. God is going to destroy it. And so, but there is a love for the world. It's a lot of symbolism with what's taking place here. But he's definitely destroying the city here. The world system is a lot of things. The world's banks, its buildings, its brands, all going to be gone. It says, what he talks about is very quickly the destruction for it, according to these verses, he talks about in one day. We're going to talk about 1 hour. When we think about the conquest of a city, it's sometimes we think, oh, 1 hour, that's a long time to destroy something. 1 day is a long time to destroy something. We've had numerous wars where we go in with literally hundreds of thousands of people to go fight a city. and still take months to defeat it. And this is a super overwhelming force, bigger firepower, bigger structure, more organization, great supply, still take months, sometimes years, to take a city. And here he's saying, one day, 1 hour specifically, there's going to be time for it. All right, so then we have the collapse of the world's economy. I won't take much time here. The kings of the earth who have committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall be wailed. So you'll notice the first group is the who? Is the kings. Okay, so these are the leaders. The Bible's talked about the 10 kings and the 10 kingdoms. Basically, anybody that succeeded has been in connection with the world. And they've lived deliciously, so very, very much living in luxury. What are they going to do? Shall bewail her and lament for her when they shall see the smoke of her burning. Standing afar off for the fear of her torment, saying, Alas, alas, that great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no man buyeth their merchandise anymore. Who's the second group? Merchants, all right? So these are the people that buy and sell, all right? So these are the people trading. These are the people, these are store owners. These are people selling stuff. And these are business owners. So you have people, you have kings, you have business owners. And the reason why is because of the merchandise. Now, it's going to mention some of the merchandise here. Verse 12, the merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones and of pearls and fine linen and purple and silk and scarlet, all thine wood and all manner vessels of ivory and all manner vessels of most precious wood and of brass and iron and marble and cinnamon, and it just keeps going, and odors and ointments and frankincense and wine and oil and fine flour and wheat and beasts and sheep and horses and chariots and slaves and souls of men. And so a whole lot of stuff. These merchants list 28 luxury items. You notice that the last two there, slaves and souls of men, talking about people. This is human trafficking, if you will. And anyway, so this is very bad. Commerce built on greed, slavery, idolatry, lavishness. The whole goal is to just get as much as you can. That's kind of the world's thing. The next one's going to be in verse number... let's just go down here in verse 14. And the fruits that thy soul lusted after are departed from thee, and all things which were dainty and goodly are departed from thee. Thou shalt find them no more at all. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for the fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and saying, Alas, alas, the great city that was clothed in fine linen and purple. And so, I'll just keep going. Scarlet and decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, for in 1 hour so great riches is come to naught. What are they mourning at this point? Oh, the banks, our stuff. Look at all. And it's not like, well, I'll never eat again. It's we're no longer rich. Look at all that riches. And by the way, their businesses are done. Like this is gone. And so but they are so upset about that falling. The next part is going to be the shipmasters. So these would be the shipping industry. This is trade. This is global cross-continental trades. Same thing. The sailors in verse number 17. Look down to verse. I guess that's good for now. So anyway, so you have all this that people are upset because of the fact that they've lost everything. You'll notice something. The key thing that you find there is an emphasis on materialism. I mean so if you're wondering why is it that we continue to shift all towards like materialistic stuff, you can't read Revelation chapter 18 and say like, well, it's not related at all. No, it's tied in. It's tied in, and so the idea of this goal of luxury and stuff and the building up of our treasures and all these things, this focus on this is demonic. That's where it's come from. The whole system to be that way is a demonic system. And it has been the goal of the world to accomplish this. And we keep trying. Every new system that we try to figure out is the goal to get us these things. And it's interesting. I heard a statistic about this. I don't know if it's true. I'm reciting something. Maybe you guys can Google or whatever you do, ChatGPT or whatever. But that the United States, this has to do with Christmas. I was working on some stuff for Thanksgiving. And anyway, so the United States, the children of the United States, 3.5% of all the children in the world. Anybody want to guess the percentage of the toys that the United States children have? Anybody want to guess? Not 90. Although I would have been like, yeah, that makes sense. But close to 50% of all the toys of the world are owned by 3.5% of the children. If I had said 90, would anybody been like, no way? No. The truth is, we're like, yeah, that makes sense. Have you seen kids' rooms? Like, we try not to have buy toys, and yet somehow they're just everywhere. I think kids are stealing them. But so there's so many toys. They're everywhere. And anyways, it's just such a push though for materialism, and it's so easy to get in that. And so when he tells people in end times, come get out of her, that would be similar to us. Come out of her, get away from this stuff. Like, this is not the way Christians live. We don't follow the world's system, the plan. We don't focus on the temporal, and luxury is not our goal. That's not what we're trying to go for. The last few verses, just to finish the chapter, verses 20 to 24. Rejoice over her, thou heaven. Okay, everybody's weeping. The kings are weeping. The merchants are weeping. The mariners, they're weeping. The sailors are weeping. Everybody's crying, and they're like, oh, our riches are gone. Our jobs are toast. And then in heaven, they said, hey, heaven, get happy. Rejoice. Time to party, all right? I'm going to say that reverently. Like, this is an exciting time. Rejoice over her, thou heaven, and ye holy apostles. Are the apostles still around right now? Are they? No? So he's talking about those in heaven. But it's interesting to mention the apostles. And prophets, again, we speak of the gifts that were given in regards to prophecy. And we say, okay, well, isn't that just preachers? I tend to believe he's literally talking about the office of the prophets and the apostles from the past. For God hath avenged you on her. So this is really cool. Hey, be happy, because you know those things they did to you? When they talk about the fact that you guys killed the prophets, you guys killed the apostles, you guys did these things, God paid it back. I took care of it. Yeah, I took care of it, is what he's saying. And verse number 21, and a mighty angel took up a stone like a great millstone. That's a really large rock. And cast it into the sea, saying, thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down. It shall be found no more at all. And I hope you get the picture. He gives you a picture of this is what it's going to be like. Has anybody thrown a large rock into like a river or something like that? Come on, how many of y'all have done that? I have kids, so they do that any chance they get. Like, the bigger the thing, the goal is the biggest splash. But it's like a violent splash, the bigger the rock, And they will ask me, like, can you throw that into the river? I'll try. And you just, but the splash that comes up, it's meant to look violent. And he says, this is what it's going to be like. It's going to be very, very violent, this type of destruction. Thus with violence shall that great city Babylon be thrown down. Verse 21. Verse 22. And the voice of harpers and musicians and of pipers and trumpeters shall be heard no more at all in thee. Talking about Babylon. And no craftsman of whatsoever craft he be shall be found any more in thee. And the sound of a millstone shall be heard no more at all in thee. So this idea of making grains and food that way, processing food. And the light of a candle shall shine no more at all in thee. And the voice of the bridegroom and the bride shall be heard no more at all in thee. So people aren't getting married. For thy merchants were the great men of the earth. For by thy sorceries were all nations deceived. And in her was found the blood of prophets and of saints and of all that were slain upon the earth. And so the idea here is this city is, while yes, we're looking forward here in this into its destruction, he's referencing history. This has always been the practice, the destruction of God's people. And he talks about the prophets and the saints. And so this is what it's been. That's why we know it's not just then, but he's paying back. This is the same system. He's not just breaking something brand new. He's breaking something that's amassed a judgment. And anyway, so this takes place here. And when we think about this happening, the rejoicing of heaven is fitting because God is repaying judgment. You and I are not supposed to be vindictive people that try to get people back, right? We're not revengeful people. Vengeance belongs to who? To God. Vengeance is mine, God says. He tells us that he's going to be the one who repays. And what we find is this is what happens here. When we think about the day of the Lord in the Old Testament. There's several occasions where it describes it as a day of vengeance. Day of vengeance. And you can only imagine when God's talking about the vengeance from back then, how much has amassed over time. It'll be swift, it'll be heavy. And the point is this: God wins. And I don't say that in a trite way that like, okay, well, this big power struggle. It's no power struggle. The moment that he brings this to mind, done in 1 hour. This is over with. There's not a fight back that Babylon had a chance or they almost pulled it off. It's over. When I was thinking about verse 22 to 23, when you talk about the music and different instruments and all that, if you lived during the time of John and you're reading this letter, like in the first century, and you're reading about this stuff, okay, there's no more musicians. They were probably the place they weren't hearing musicians anyways. Like, you had to kind of be in a nice area to have musicians playing instruments. All right, so you would have to have instruments for one thing, and they're kind of hiding in how they're doing these things. And so anyways, that kind of expands. But if people were listening to music, that represented wealthy places. And when you think of Babylon, their idea would have been like, man, they must have had musicians everywhere. Well, we don't even need musicians hardly. We have, I was going to say radio. We have radios, I guess. I think they'll still work, but we can play music. It's just, isn't it interesting? This is a simple thing. It's not a huge point. Anywhere you go, they play music. You go to whatever store, go to Goodwill, you can go to Macy's or Nordstrom's. They're all playing music. Everywhere you go, they're playing music. Public areas now, downtown, outside, they'll play music. Music is absolutely everywhere. God says, it's done. It's done. It's over. There's no more weddings. That's important because on several occasions, Jesus talks about it, that in this destruction, that people are still getting married until God says, all right, that's done. Like, the marriage has the concept that there's something hopeful for the future. Like this, something can go well. All right, so let's get married. And hopeless now, it's gone. And so it's what we're seeing. I encourage you, Christian, don't love the world. It's dying. It loses. It burns. Don't envy its success. It is cursed. And so in Genesis 11, man says, let us build. And then Revelation 18, God says, it's fallen. It's fallen. And so let's go ahead and pray. Thank you, Father, for again, an evening to be able to look at the book of Revelation. I'm excited to see how you reveal things in there and just the amazing message that you give to us, God, the warning. I just think of how often that in my own heart I love the world, the things that are in it. God, I think of songs we sing about that, how we're distracted by shiny things and many things that the world offers us. And God, I pray that that would not be our hearts. Please shift us away from that. Help us focus on you further, on judge, on the one who gets vengeance on those. And I think of this now, God, those that have been against you and against Christians that we have supported their system, God. And I pray, Lord, that we would be renewed in our efforts as believers to witness, to share the gospel, to be active in our testimony, to live for you, and to not be focused on the things of this world. Lord, to live generously before your glory, to enjoy the amazing things that we do get to enjoy, but again, as we glorify you and how you've allowed man to invent and do things. God, I thank you for the luxuries we do get to enjoy, but Lord, that we would not live for them. I thank you again for this evening. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, thank you all for being here this evening. I don't know that we're going to go into Revelation 19 next week. I'm not 100% sure. There's a reason for that, having to do with, I'll finish through with Revelation eventually, but having to put some things together about the way it's going to be tied into the judgment. Anyways, I'm not sure. I'll get you guys updated on what in case you're wondering, like reading ahead for Revelation 19, you still can. Just don't be disappointed next week if I don't. All right. That'll let you know.